How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I left this out of the intro, but you are also a crossword clue in the New York Times crossword.
That was my first time in the New York Times. I've been in the LA Times a couple times, maybe if more than a couple. And I've been, yeah, but this is my first New York Times one, which is a very big deal. And it was, I believe, a Wednesday, which is
Oh,
a hard day.
yeah.
They get harder as the week goes
Oh.
on. So it's very exciting.
Do you know what you intersected with?
No, I do not know what I intersected with.
That'd be a good trivia question to drop at dinner parties, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You wanted to make sure it's something good, like kale with the A or something like that. Um, you star in Call Me Cat as Cat. She's a 39-year-old single woman who runs a cat cafe. Tell me a little bit about Cat.
Well, our show is based on the BBC show Miranda, which ran for 3 seasons and was very popular over there. And Miranda was a very unusual woman. She was distinguished by her very tall stature and awkwardness. I'm not very tall, but I am awkward. And so the American version of Miranda is Call Me Cat. And yeah, this is a very human woman. She's silly, she's goofy, she's got an active imagination. We do break the fourth wall because Miranda did. And she talks to the camera sometimes as kind of her other friend. She's a woman who's alone a lot, but not necessarily lonely. And we have a really fun cast and a lot of really talented people, Leslie Jordan and Swoosie Kurtz. And we have Cheyenne Jackson and Kyla Pratt and Julian Gant. And it's just a really fun cast. We love that we're not in our homes anymore and that we can actually work together. It's very difficult to produce a show during COVID, but we did 13 episodes, so we're proud of that.
Hard to do, especially because it's I guess it's the kind of show that would normally have an audience.
Yes, so we are a classic sitcom, so we don't have an audience. That's hard. Everything takes a very long time because everyone's in shields and masks. So even small things like taking a sip of water or getting a snack or going to the bathroom adds time, and it accumulates over the course of a day and a week, because everything takes longer for everything to happen because of all the COVID restrictions. And we were tested about twice daily, absolutely once a day and usually twice a day. So, imagine an entire crew needing to stay 6 feet apart and wearing masks and shields. And it was intense. I mean, we're not working in the coal mines, but producing a television show under those conditions, also with positives coming in and needing to, send people home and have people multiple tested, it's stressful. It's a very interesting way to make television right now.
How about the performance side of it?
Um, I mean, I guess some would argue we've been impacted by not having an audience, but
Yeah.
again, I don't mean to say we have the hardest job in the world, but as actors, not being able to see most of people's faces, when rehearsing and performing is hard. We do obviously take our masks off for filming, but a lot of the comedy that we do is, in some sense predicated on, kind of what we're reacting to and what people look like. So, it's a challenge that's not insurmountable, but it's definitely cumbersome also to perform, all week with a mask on your face and then, take it off.
What was the word you used there when I said you're used to having an audience? I think you said like it's a traditional sitcom. It's a
We are a classic sitcom where you perform in front of a live audience. Big Bang Theory was in front of a live audience. I did a series Blossom when I was a teenager. Every episode was in front of a live audience. So yeah.
I think when I was watching the show, I forgot about how effective that form is. You know what I mean? Especially when it comes to physical comedy. And I
Yeah.
think that form lends itself well to it.
Yeah, I mean, doing a show in front of a live audience it's a lot like a play, meaning there's an audience you're performing for, and things happen that, you don't plan for and you only see when the audience reacts to something. So simple things like the audience's reaction to your reactions is something that it's very hard to calculate without an audience there. Especially because laughter tends to grow in groups like that. You might have one person laugh, but it's when a lot of people laugh that something kind of builds momentum like that as a comedian. And in terms of physical comedy, which we do, a good amount of, yeah, that's absolutely an issue of timing and having to time out what people will think is funny, when they think it's funny. also as an actor, I don't know what people are seeing. So for me to imagine when a laugh would come, it's just an extra challenge.
It's a lovely form that I never thought of it in that way before, I was watching
Yeah.
it. It's funny you mentioned it. I was watching it and imagining a play. Maybe because I'm kind of theater starved right now, but there is something lovely about the form.
Yeah, I mean, I love it, and it tends to be a much easier schedule also, and I have kids, and so sitcom is really ideal, if you have kids, because you work more like school hours. Obviously, with COVID, we were working some very, very long days, but as we get more of our, COVID policies hopefully become more second nature, our days will move along a little bit more swiftly, and it'll be a bit more like the schedule that I was used to on Big Bang.
What do you love about Kat?
Like about the character or
Yeah,
the show?
her.
Um, I mean, she's very bold and she's not afraid to be herself. It's very unusual to have a woman her size on television. And that's just true. Like for leading ladies, we usually see a very specific kind of female, and I get to be myself and she gets to be herself because of it. And she's kind of she's an adult who still has a very strong sense of the importance of being a kid, and I think that's something that I strive to balance, and tend to really gravitate towards people who have a very playful side. So she's definitely that.
I I asked you what you love about her because I could tell that love was really there when I watched this video you put up on your own YouTube account. I think responding to some of the criticism of the show and of the
Yeah.
character. Could you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel, and we actually just hit 1 million subscribers, which
Hey,
is very,
congratulations.
thank you. It's a very big deal in the YouTube world.
Yeah, right, it is.
So yeah, when Call Me Kat came out, obviously critics say all sorts of things, and I typically don't read reviews and feel the need to address every single person's dislike of my clothing or whatever it is that they don't like. And there's many things that, our show is still working out. A first season show is bound to have its, its challenges, and try and figure out what really sits best with the audience. But a couple of the things that people were picking on were things that they were acting like we didn't know were strange. Like, we know that breaking the fourth wall is strange. We know that talking to the audience and waving at the end of an episode, we know that those are unusual things. But I at least felt like I needed to stomp my foot and be like, if you don't like it, it's because it was in the original Miranda. Like, we're not just completely haphazardly like, we don't know what we're doing here. So I wanted people to know that there's a deliberateness to how we were making this show. And also in particular, there are reasons, and again, I don't plan on doing this for every single episode that people don't like, but I did want to make a statement that there are reasons that we do what we're doing, and we're doing it consciously, and that it means a lot for us to make a show about a joyful woman who kind of gets to be in her own body and own her power, I think, as the kids say. So
and that makes sense around, because I think one of the criticisms you address is around her appearance, right?
Yeah, right. She's very, she does. I don't wear a lot of makeup. And my hair is just like my weird hair. And so we kind of just like curl it up and let it do what it's going to do.
Right.
Yeah, this is a character who wears sneakers with dresses, and she's, playful in her colored choice in clothing. And she's very quirky. She always has like all the jewelry accessorized, like way more than you need. But yeah, we're trying to show a different kind of woman than you're used to seeing. And for some people, they might think, what did my younger son say? He's 12. He's like, I don't know if people are going to want to watch, because that's kind of what they're like already.
That is profound. That is profound that it's not like an ask.
He's like, people want to watch someone that they wish they could be, not someone they already are. Thanks, Fred.
Come on, Fred. Give me a break. You said something interesting in the thing. You said, I've been in this business for a really long time. I had a sitcom when I was a teenager. And, I never would have seen this kind of criticism, I guess, because there wasn't social media. And it made me think that, sort of part and parcel to that, you wouldn't have had an opportunity to talk back the way you did,
Yeah, I mean, no, people said many mean things about me when Blossom came out.
Really?
I mean, there was one reporter, I think it was literally, I think it was, maybe our pilot episode or the first couple. And this writer, I mean, I'll never forget it, literally said that I had a face of mismatched features. I mean, and I was like 14. I was 14. And all it took was reading that to ruin my day and make me remember it 34 years later.
You're a
But
child.
yeah, you're right. There was no way to really have a voice like that. I mean, think about what the movie stars were like of like the 30s and 40s. You didn't know anything about them, right? Like you would find out later, like, oh my gosh, she was married to that other famous person, or like they had 3 kids out of wedlock. He was gay. I didn't know. Like no one knew anything because their job was to entertain you. And there's a lot of pluses and minuses to learning the other sides of celebrities. But like I know many things about Chrissy Teigen that I never would have known without social media.
I'm so sorry that, I mean, you were a child. That's very,
But you know what? It goes with the territory,
a
though. I
child,
mean,
though, for God's sake.
I understand.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Do you have any kids who are that age?
Yeah, I have a 15-year-old. I mean, and I also see what social media is like for him. Um, but yeah, I mean, their faces seem to be growing at more natural proportions than mine
Oh, for
did,
God's
you know?
sake. His 15 very different than your 15. I'll say that.
Oh, totally. I mean, well, he knows a lot more than he knows a lot more about a class of things that I never knew about, but also like he thinks he's much smarter than me in general, which doesn't seem about right.
Well, let's talk about that in a second. If you're just tuning in, my guest is Mayim Bialik. She stars in Call Me Kat, and she also hosts a podcast called Mayim Bialik's Breakdown, which, by the way, features an original theme song by Canada's own Ed Robertson of the Bare Naked Ladies.
That's right. And my co-host Jonathan Cohen, proud Canadian, which we talk about in almost every episode.
It's essentially a Canadian show, is what you're telling me.
I'm obsessed with Canada. Yes.
I know, and we're going to talk about Jeopardy later, and that's Ali. He was Canadian.
Totally.
You know what? You're essentially you're an official Canadian right now.
Thank you.
I'm saying I can do that on the CBC. I'm allowed to do that. Talk to me about this podcast. What did you want to add? Because you have an interesting perspective on it as a neuroscientist too. Like, what did you want to add to the conversation we're having around mental health?
Well, I love that you use that phrase because in general, that's sort of my policy in terms of YouTube, even in terms of social media. Like I really try and select things that are a different perspective or something you haven't heard about an issue. Like you don't need to hear every celebrity give their opinion on Black Lives Matter. I promise. Like, it's very clear, from my social media, what I repost, but you don't need to hear, every celebrity's thoughts on everything that happens. And there's plenty of celebrities who will constantly talk about everything in their head. I promise that's not me. But what I wanted to do with this podcast was, yes, apply sort of my neuroscience lens, essentially to revealing, a lot of my personal struggles with mental health. And it's something I've been more vocal about in the last, 5 to 10 years. But this is kind of, I guess, putting my intellectual money where my mouth is.
Yeah.
And really opening up a forum to have these conversations and allow for all of the mistakes that we make as we struggle, with mental health, meaning here's what works, here's what didn't work. I've gone the traditional route. I've been on medication. I've not been on medication. I've gone to shamans and healers. And Jonathan also has a very interesting, history in dealing with all sorts of mental health challenges. So we talk very openly about that. And, we are told that we're funny, but the goal is not to be a comedy, but we just happen to be kind of playful and fun. However, we're also trying to show both the seriousness and the need for perspective on how we view and talk about mental health, with the ultimate goal being to destigmatize these issues and encourage people to finally get help. Many of us wait too long.
Yeah.
And
they think we're not bad enough. We're not sick enough yet,
Exactly. We're not sick enough, or we're embarrassed, or it feels shameful, or we don't know how to find the right therapist. And like, what if you don't like them? Does that mean therapy didn't work for you? It usually just means you didn't find the right therapist. And also people fear that like, if I go on medication, it's forever and I'm never going to be able to control my own emotions, or I'll be a zombie, or I won't be able to have sex, or, all these things that we hear and that we're scared about. But the fact is there's a lot of roads that lead to mental health. And also the longer you wait, the more your brain gets used to not being happy, not being calm. And it is harder to undo those patterns. I promise you.
Well, it's funny, I had sort of a crisis when I was 28. And then I spent the years after that talking about it and going on about, that it's important that we destigmatize it, it's important that we talk about it and all this stuff. And then a couple of months ago, I had sort of my first crisis since then. And it reminded me of how painful it actually is. Like I wish I could have gone the rest of my life saying stuff, like, well, it's important. I once had mental health issues rather than, like I think John Mulaney had a great line. He said, there are so many people who wish they were comedians than are comedians. I wish I had mental health issues rather than have mental health issues. But you ask an interesting question that I wanted to kind of put back at you here. I mean, you talk about dealing with anxiety. Recently, you shared for the first time publicly that you're recovering from an eating disorder. And the question you ask is, how does it feel to share something so personally, so openly? And I wanted to ask you that.
It feels awkward. It feels like, it feels uncomfortable. I really wasn't planning on talking about it. I mean, things have come up on the podcast before, but it was specifically having Glennon Doyle on, someone who's known for speaking her mind wherever she's at, in her life. And she's been so open about her eating disorder that it sort of just kind of, it's sort of rolled out. It wasn't impulsive.
Yeah.
But it was definitely something that I felt like, it's one thing for me to say, like, it's important to talk about mental health and all these challenges, but it's another to say, like, the kind of vulnerability that my guests are having with me is the kind of vulnerability I'm prepared to have, with my guests and with our audience. And, I mean, I think it shocked Jonathan too. We were both like, okay, well, that happened, and then like I get emails from dietitians like, hi, would you like to work with me?
Okay.
Like, no, I'm good. Thanks. I'm pretty good. I mean, I'm in, I don't like to say recovering. I say, I'm in recovery, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a program that we work, of recovery. And it's a daily struggle, as are a lot of challenges, that we have. And a close friend recently said, gosh, it wasn't until I listened to your podcast that I appreciated how normal you seem, even though you're clearly not.
What do you mean?
Well, I think she meant like, gosh, I function in the world and like I get a lot done and I'm very productive, but yeah, there's a lot going on in here. There's a lot going on. And if you're someone who's suffered from panic disorder enough so that you've had to pull the car over and think you needed to go to the hospital, like that's a level, that's not something that's pleasant to revisit. That's not something that you can kind of, joke about over beers.
Right. I want to talk to you about that in the context of Blossom, if that's all right. Just take a listen to this.
Dumb. How can I be so dumb? Tell me about it.
What? What happened?
Jason Bickler asked me what time it was. I told him it was 2:15.
What time was it?
It was 2:15.
Were you supposed to give him the weather and surf report, too?
I should have said something else. Anything else to let him know I was interested, that I thought he was really hot. Relax, Dad. Instead, all I said was 2:15 and kept walking, and now, Saturday night, while Six is out with Jason's friend Ricky, I'll be home alone like every other loser trying to guess the exact popping time of a bag of microwave popcorn.
That's a clip from the sitcom Blossom starring my guest, Mayim Bialik.
What's with that bizarre tiny voice I had?
What do you mean?
That's so weird. I had a weird voice.
What do you hear there?
I think it's cute. I mean, a really sweet element of that show was that we had this character who like wasn't the popular girl, wasn't the nerd, but was kind of like somewhere in between. But yeah, she sounds kind of cute.
She is. How did you? It would have been very reasonable for someone who had the success that you had when you were 14. And not just the success that you had when you were 14. That went on how long? Until you were how old?
5 years, till I was 19.
And also was like, supporting an industry of people who had jobs and were paying for their children's education based on a 15-year-old's performance on a TV show. It would have been very reasonable for you to go, especially if you went, this is a radio show. This is the last thing I can do on a radio show, by the way. For you to dust your hands of it and say, I'm done. Especially when you go off to do neuroscience, There are no shortage of people who got really famous when they were really young who don't do that thing anymore. Especially when they were criticized like you were. What do you account for it? For keeping going?
You mean for why I came back?
Yeah.
Well, I came back for a couple reasons. I mean, the biggest one was that I left for 12 years. I had 2 kids. I was teaching neuroscience. in the junior high and homeschool community here, I had designed a curriculum that I was teaching. And, I had 2 kids. I had an infant and a toddler. And the God's honest truth, and you can thank the American healthcare system, I ran out of insurance. And I figured if I can just get a couple jobs, like even small parts, you can have enough earnings to try and get your insurance back. My husband at the time, I mean, we're divorced now, but at the time he was a grad student. And so, we were running out of health insurance. So that's like actually a thing. And I hadn't really ever performed as an adult, and I hadn't had that experience. And while I didn't miss the fame, and I'm not like a person who's attracted by the money of it and the wardrobe and the red carpet, like that stuff is very hard for me. I do miss, performing. And so that was something I was willing to kind of dip a toe in. I didn't expect that I'd be a regular on a TV show again. I had never seen The Big Bang Theory. Like I literally I pumped for 2 years on that stage. Like I had little ones at home,
And that show became bigger than you could ever imagine a show becoming.
I mean, it was already big when I joined, but yeah, we became the #1 comedy in America in that time that I was there. Yeah.
What did you take away from being on a show like that?
Oh my gosh. I mean, you'll never get a job like that again, and I'm not just talking about, what was reported in the, in the trades of earnings. I mean, to be on a show with that level of critical love and fan love and, people feeling like they finally can understand things about themselves and about their friendships. And, the number of letters and love that we received from people who felt like with Amy and Sheldon, that they were finally seeing a couple who was special, but who could still find each other. We would have Make-A-Wish kids come whose wish was to spend time with us. And we got to have those experiences. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And I was nominated for 4 Emmys. Like, that's crazy. That's not supposed to happen.
How do I put this? Does it feel like when you're 14 to 19, I might as well not remember those years at all? You know what I mean? Like, maybe I'll even say if I could, I would love to forget those years. You know what I mean? They weren't particularly happy years for young banjo playing Tom in Newfoundland. But then you were, I mean, everyone knew who you were, and you were a joke on The Simpsons, and you were Lisa Looks Like Blossom, and you were, it was so big, and you were in reruns and all this other stuff too. When you came back, was it a little bit easier, or like maybe easier is not the word I'm looking for, but did you feel a little bit more on solid ground being like, yeah, this is maybe a bit easier as an adult?
Oh yeah. I mean, being a teenager and, and having that pressure of a show on your shoulders is a lot. Also, I was a very contemplative teenager. I was very, I was mopey and dark and listened to dark music and, wore all black and, Doc Martens with every outfit. So I was also, in the middle of my own teenage angst and, having that whole experience while also like needing to go to work and like smile and be happy. And so there was a lot there, but coming back after being out in the real world where I had to like, be knocked down at the knees by professors, for a thesis that was 300 pages that I had to write, or else, like having 2 children without drugs. Like I had this whole amazing life. And then coming back, I was like, I don't care if they ask me to mop the floors here. Like, I'll do anything. I'm just happy that anyone wants to look at me, like,
oh, that's lovely.
I mean, you have such perspective when you have kids. And like I said, when you've been like out in the real world, so I was just grateful to have any job. Like being an employed actor is something that most actors don't get to experience. Like most actors go from job to job or, have other side jobs. Like I was a fully employed person, and I went, from someone who was teaching piano and Hebrew and like all these different things. So like I have one job and I go to it every day and I pump and I come home and I go to sleep,
What does pump mean?
Like pumping breast milk.
Oh, okay. Right. I thought it was like an acting thing.
No, it's not an acting thing.
Like you were going, whoo, whoo, whoo,
Sorry. I just meant I was breastfeeding, a child during those years. So I was like, I was that mom. I was that working mom,
Oh, right. And I mean, I guess the reason I bring all this up is because, from the outside, it looks amazing. you know, like a childhood celebrity, you know, a big hit money show, a PhD in neuroscience, a comeback on the biggest show on TV in the past 30 years, your own show now. But I think part of the mental health podcast that I find interesting is that you say that, like, even though it looks great from the outside, people can think you have nothing to complain about. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I try and, you know, deal with that. I try and speak about it openly, because I think that is, I mean, I think that's part of the challenge also of celebrities having such access to people. You do get to hear, you know, how Chrissy Teigen feels about, you know, the pasta she just cooked. And, you know, so that level of intimacy can also leave you open to a lot of criticism. And I think that notion of, what do you have to complain about is very real. And I think also, you know, the last several years here in these United States, you know, have shown even more the systemic racism and the systemic injustice that is part of the fabric of this country and our culture. So it's very, you know, it's a humbling experience to get on a podcast and say, like, here are all the things that I've been through, because you never know what someone is going through. And mental illness does not discriminate. There's, you know, of course, having money makes things, you know, makes having access to resources easier. And we talk about that a lot. And the fact is, you know, my feeling is healthcare and mental health care is a human right. And I'm doing my best to use my platform to reach people who otherwise may not be getting that care. You know, we did an episode with Ricky Lake and Abby Epstein about the overprescription of birth control, especially to women of color, and to women in underserved populations. And, you know, the idea is not to demonize those communities. It's to try and help start conversations, because we all deserve to be having these conversations about all these aspects of mental health. It's
a really powerful podcast, and I really appreciate your candor in talking to me about the whole career today.
Thank you.
Before I go, can you tell me have you done Jeopardy yet?
I did. It starts to air here May 31st. I did 10 episodes.
Hosted.
I guest hosted. Yeah.
Oh.
I wore a different blazer every episode, and it was unbelievable. Like, it was like, it's like it fit like a glove. Like, I work at that pace. Like, I loved it. I loved it. There's a lot of French though, because Mr. Alex Trebek spoke French.
Yeah.
Canadian. So there's a lot of French clues, and I do not speak French. It's the language I don't speak. So I had to do a couple retakes an episode.
I was wondering about that, because his pronouncers were so great. I wonder if they give you another shot, do they?
Oh yeah. They, like, every, you know, lake in Africa that you might watch the episode and be like, how did Mayim know how to pronounce that lake in Africa? I got help. That's how it works.
Did you like it?
I loved it. I mean, I thrived in that environment. I mean, it's very fast paced. You have to move it along. Like, one of the easier things is reading all those clues. The harder things are keeping track of every segment. And this, you know, this segment we do this, and now it's double Jeopardy, and now we got to do this. And if you don't say this, you got to take a peanut. It's like, it's so crazy, but I loved it.
Wait, are you going to do it? Is that an option?
I mean, I'm happy to do it if it's an option, but I don't think it's like, Mayim, you get to decide. But, you know, I think we need to wait for my episodes to air. And then if people like me, for sure, let the powers that be know. I don't think they've picked a host. So yeah.
I am excited to watch you host Jeopardy.
I had the best time.
It's lovely to talk to you. Nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you as well.
We'll see you hopefully someday in real life in Toronto or something.
Absolutely. Can't wait to get back.